Hi everyone, welcome back to Job One for All. In this video we are going to continue the topic about enumeration. So as you saw in the previous video, we have enumeration. That's a special type of class. Basically you just create adding enum instead of class, and we have here the enumerations that they are the type of customer type. And to use, you use like any other relationship association you have with another class by adding it as attribute. So let's see, for example, another option. We did create another class entirely for another file, let's say, entirely for the customer type, but we can also add enumerations inside a class. So for example, let's say that we have this customer and we would like to have the payment type that can be debit or credit. We can create enumeration inside this class, public enumeration enum payment type. So with payment type, we do have two options, debit or credit. So now I have payment type that is an enumeration, the declaration of the enumeration inside the customer. So this means that I have to access this payment type through the customer, but we don't have an association yet. Why? Because we don't have an attribute. I need to also add an attribute here, that's the payment type. So as you can see now, this payment type will be one of these two options, debit or credit. So basically it's like you are adding your entire file inside your class. And for the public, you can use any of the access modifiers. You can use private, you could use protected, or you can use the package access modifier. So the package access modifier, it is like the protected, but the difference is everybody inside the same package can access the attribute directly, like they are public. So if I say here payment type, the access modifier of this payment type is the package access modifier. So this means that everybody inside the package domain can access this attribute directly without passing through getters or setters. So let's keep this private and let's keep this public. So now I will recreate the constructor with all types and also the toString. Cool. Now I need to fix the customer test. So here now let's work with only two, individual and company. Let's rename and let's remove these two. Okay, so this individual paid with debit. So customer, even if you don't see it, if I type here, if I select debit, you will see that we have customer.paymenttype.debit. If you press Alt Enter, you have this option to add the import for the payment type, and you will see now that now we only have payment.debit without the customer before. And here we have credit. As you can see, we have directly payment type.credit. Cool. So with this option, if we execute now, we will see the result, including the payment type debit or credit. Okay, so this is nice. What else can we do with enumeration? Imagine that you have like a database with 30 million customers, and in the database, the customer type, individual or company, they are numbers. So basically 1 represents the individual, and then number 2 represents the company. And how can we use enumeration to maintain? Because for example, well, if you ask 1 or 2, it's easy, but let's say that you have like 10 different types of customer. So how do you remember all those numbers? You would like to have like something visual that it's easy to remember, like an enumeration. But when you are saving in the database, you would like to make sure that you have the right number. So basically, as I said, enumeration, it is like a class. So we can have attributes. Enumeration is a special type of class that each one of the enumerations that you have is like an object. And each one of these objects, they can have their own attributes. And how they are created? Well, if we come here and reload from disk, you have here K enumeration, And inside domain, customer type, you have here a constructor. So you are never going to call the constructor because it's private. The one responsible for calling the constructor is the enumeration itself. So if there is a constructor, there is a chance for us to customize this object. Basically, in the customer type, I would like to say, okay, 1 is individual, 2 is company, 3 is startup. So I can say, how do we call if we were creating an object and passing data to a constructor? Like this. So 1, 2, 3. Well, they are failing. Of course, we have to create a constructor that will match this data. So the constructor by default is private. So either you put it as a private or not, it's your option. So if I add a public customer type here and int value, let's call database DB value. You do have a problem. It cannot be public. It cannot be protected. It cannot be default. But when you do like this, it's private. So it is private. And IntelliJ is just telling you, hey, you don't need to add private because it's already by default private. Okay, so as you can see, we have now individual company startup sending this value, and we can of course create attribute private int db value, and now this dot db value equals db value. So since this value is not going to change because these individual company and start type are the ones responsible for initializing, we could add final. And now we would have something like this, and this dot db value. So basically, every time you create a enumeration, it's kind of loading in memory all the values that you have here. So we are going to see that later. We have db value, that will be one of these 3 values. And of course, we can either create a getter, but since this is final, we can make it public. Can we make it static? Well, you can make it static, but we do have a problem. If I assign a value here, well, the problem with assigning a value here is that we can never access the values that we have available here. And why is that? Because the object, the constructor, needs to exist to call this customer type. And remember, static will exist even before. So we cannot do this. We need to make this only final. So when I call individual, I will have access to this db value, company the same thing, and startup the same thing. Now I will go back to my customer and I will do the following. I will come here, customer type db database value. So basically, customer type will be one of those 3 types, either individual, company, or startup, and I would like the value dot db value. If I execute now, Shift F10, you will notice that we have the database value that's either 1 or 2. So it's way easier for someone using this class because they don't need to care about the number. They just need to see what exactly they want to pass to the customer class. And of course, if you don't want to make it final, it's possible. You just change this to db value, but it's a good idea to make it private and change it the class to add the getter. So now that we have this private here, we can call get db value, and the result will be the same. You are not tied to only one attribute. You can have several different attributes. For example, let's say that we would like to have a report name that's prettier than this uppercase thing. Report value, and this will be a string. Basically, when they call this, I want to have like individual, and I want to have here company, and I want to have here start. I'm not sure how to write startup. I believe it is like this. String report value, and then this dot report value equals report value. Okay, now we just need to also getter report value. Now back at the customer, we can add here, instead of customer type for the type, we can get the report value to make the console logs a bit prettier. So Shift F10, and we have now the value we defined for each one of these enumerations. So basically, this is what you have to remember for this class. You can have different attributes being passed in the constructor. You have to remember that you cannot call the constructor directly. The one responsible for that are the enumerations. If you come here, let's reload from this to update, you will notice that we have now the constructor with the values that we defined, and the ones responsible for calling are these enumerations. And now, of course, you can add the enumerations inside your class. So basically, that's it. I hope you enjoyed. There are still more things to talk about enumerations. So see you in the next video.